The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. You're listening to the Everyday Therapy Podcast. I'm JC Rader.
And I'm Julianne Schroeder.
And we're therapists bringing you honest conversations around emotional wellness and self-development.
Inspired by our personal experiences in therapy and because of our clients, we realize therapy has so much to offer both on and off the couch. Listen for tips and tools to navigate all the challenges that life throws your way.
To give us feedback on topics and guests, or for more information on our community events, counseling, or online services, contact us at everydaytherapypodcast.com. Hello, and we wanted to shout out White Rock Counseling.
Shout out ourselves.
We are at White Rock Counseling, and so we offer in-person sessions as well as online sessions and yoga therapy as well. So shoot us an email or give us a call, and we can do a consultation to see if we would be a good fit for you guys and give you resources otherwise. But yeah, check us out, whiterockcounseling.com. But let's jump into our series today, our session today, what we are talking about. Our episode. We are not at White Rock Counseling right now. We are doing a podcast, yes.
And this is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
We're getting real.
Yeah. We did an episode, like one of our first episodes was myths about therapy. I kind of feel like this is just adding on to that a little bit.
Yeah, so today we want to talk about when therapy is not working.
Yeah, how to troubleshoot a little bit.
And whether it's you or your therapist.
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think it would be helpful for people kind of setting expectations if you've wanted to go into therapy. Like, what does it look like? And what are you responsible for? What are your therapists responsible for too? So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have in my consent form that I share with clients too, educating about the process of therapy, that can't guarantee what's going to happen. And at times it can feel like things are getting worse before it gets better. And maybe there are changes.
I feel like all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like it does get worse before it gets better. I mean, maybe not for everyone, but...
But yeah, most of the time we're not always fully looking at what is, perpetuating our pain or emotional distress.
Absolutely. To be like real and honest with yourself and reflective and take feedback, like that's tough stuff.
Yeah. But we do definitely want to, in today's episode, figure out, okay, really when you feel stuck, or what are some signs that therapy isn't working and you're not getting what you need out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So do you want to talk about if it's you or the therapist?
Well, you break down the pie chart.
Oh,
the therapy pie chart.
Yeah.
So what makes therapy effective?
Yeah. So there's this magical pie chart or ratio.
Yeah.
Math equation.
Yeah.
Something of the sort. So generally speaking, what makes therapy most effective is 40% is the relationship that you have with your therapist.
Which is huge.
Huge.
That's a big portion of what makes therapy work. And I tell my clients, like the first time I meet them, I tell them that, like the relationship's the most important. And if you don't click with me, like, let's be honest, let's be real. Tell me what you need, or let me help you find somebody that's, different. In whatever way fits for you.
Yeah. And I love to encourage people to vet their therapists before coming in.
Like read their bio.
Read their bio, read their Psychology Today profile. If they have a business social media account, that can be really helpful for you getting a sense of who they are and what they believe about therapy and how they're going to work with you.
Absolutely. Talk to them on the phone, shoot them an email. I've had clients like interview me
Oh, same here too.
before, which is, I don't know, it's always like, it's almost like fun in a way, and a little funny, but
Yeah, no, I
Don't
think
mind
that's
it.
I think that's great because 40% is about the therapeutic relationship. 30% is technique and skill. So this is helpful if there's a specialty that you're seeking help for. You do want your therapist to be like knowledgeable and competent in helping, whether it's with anxiety or trauma or
yeah, especially like you said, if you have something specific going on, such as I think about trichotillomania, hair pulling, or body focused repetitive behaviors. It's a very specialized type of therapy that the therapist will use for that, or eating disorders. Yeah, so definitely make sure that you have somebody in that specialty area.
Yeah, and ask them really what their experience is with the whatever issue it is. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions
Absolutely.
in trying to figure out who's best for you. So, okay, outside of technique and skills, which that does fall on the therapist, okay, 15% of therapy, success in therapy is your expectations. So, do you feel like you're open to the process?
Yeah. Do you believe therapy works?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
It kind of reminds me of the placebo effect a little bit.
yeah.
It's like a sugar pill. Like, does therapy work or not? What do you think about
Yeah.
it?
And do you trust in your therapist and their guidance? And so you're welcome to ask, okay, why are we doing this? And I think that's important.
Yeah.
So that's 15%. And then the rest, so I think that's another 15%, is just extraneous factors. So, I mean, the way that I think about it is like your level of stress in your life, whether it's, finances or just your availability to come to a session.
The people in your lives, like the relationships you're in,
Yeah, stuff that
is
you-
out of your control,
Control and
out
your
of the
therapist's
therapist's
control.
control. Yeah.
um,
We're just going to finish each other's sentences. Yeah, so that's super important to realize that the relationship is the most important thing. So going back to that of like, make sure that you like your therapist and you believe they're competent. So,
Yeah. Your therapist won't be your friend, but you do want to think that you could like your therapist in that way.
Yeah.
Am I making that distinction okay?
I think so. Yeah.
Like it is so important for you to feel like you can share openly with your therapist
Yeah.
like you would a friend.
Right.
So that's where I'm coming at with that.
Yeah.
But then also respecting that and understanding that they have knowledge and are guiding you in a way that will be helpful.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the therapist first. Like, when is it the therapist's fault
Oh, yeah.
that something's, not right?
Yeah. So we're not perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
We can't also read minds.
Yeah.
So we'll say that.
And we can't cure anything.
No. But there are some things that you should, like, if you are noticing with your therapist, that it deserves to be acknowledged.
Right.
So if you feel judged by your therapist or like you feel like you can't share a certain aspect of yourself, that's a big red flag.
Yeah. If you're withholding information or, just feeling the sense of judgment on the other end.
And if that's like a consistent feeling, versus if they're perhaps, I'll say this, that sometimes like we can hear things differently, like just because we have our histories in our own lens of viewing the world. Your therapist might be saying something and then you might hear it differently than what they how they were saying it.
Yeah.
Right. And it hurts your feelings. So if it's an isolated incident and or they really did say something that was judgmental and there's no way around it, you can bring that up and see if it's workable. But if there's a constant feeling of judgment in the room and you're lying and, you just feel like you really can't be yourself, like, no, get out of there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a difference of like, if you're not willing to share the information because of you versus the therapist, like I feel like the therapist is judging me versus like I have shame about this issue. I'm not ready to share it yet. Or you kind of need to push yourself to share it.
Yeah. So you have to like look at your responsibility in it as well.
What are some of the numbers? Because we always ask our clients, like going into session, have you been to therapy before? What did you like about your previous therapist? What did you not like? Why are you here with me today? And that gives us feedback of like what a client's looking for ultimately. Do you have any stories of what clients have told you, like past therapists they didn't like about them or situations that have come up?
Yeah. One that I've heard before is they felt like the therapist wasn't doing anything.
Okay.
So these clients probably
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, want more direction. And so I will say this, and I will share with my clients. Yeah, I very much view therapy in the way that I do it as a collaborative relationship. And at the beginning, and you will attest to this too, likely, that I am going to be more directive in helping you get used to therapy. So that means I'm going to ask questions, kind of lead the session in certain ways, maybe revisit topics that I know would be helpful for you.
Yeah. And a lot of it is gathering information in the beginning of session. So yeah, we can ask a lot of questions up front.
Yes. And because of the clients that I see, at some point I know that because a lot of them are really wanting like others' approval, that I don't want to play into that. So at times I'm not going to tell them what they need to do. I'm going to have them think through different options and instill that confidence to make a decision.
Yeah.
So, where was I going with that?
Yeah. Well,
so the clients that are saying that the therapist wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
And so that can just be something that could be fixed potentially if you talked about it, or it might not.
Yeah. Yeah, you can ask, I need more direction, or I want more things to take away. I want homework. I want concrete, tangible things to work on out of session, or yes. So there's that. And then the other side of it is, yes, maybe is your therapist maybe more of a reflective therapist that gives a lot of space for a client. And yeah, maybe that's not what you're looking for. That's not what you're seeking in therapy.
And that could be okay.
Yeah. And maybe want to choose a different therapist based on that. I think what can happen sometimes, which I'm always aware of whenever somebody says like, oh, the therapist I didn't feel like they did anything. It does make me think like, I would like the client to reflect on their responsibility, which we'll get to later, of like making sure that they're playing their part in therapy, because it's not all on the therapist to make changes or to do anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have a common
I
complaint?
think the number one complaint for new clients that come in based on past therapists is the fear of feeling judgment from a therapist. And oftentimes, and this isn't to dig on Christian therapists, I think that they're great and they fit really well for people who are seeking that like value and that direction and that guidance. But oftentimes it's that they thought that their therapist was judgmental. And sometimes it is with like a religious based, and just the most common that comes up is like Christian. So yeah, of like fear of maybe talking about sex or that's kind of the main one.
Yeah.
Sex or just like doing something wrong in the eyes of like the church or God or whatever. But like a good like Christian therapist would like help you work through that, right? But yeah, that does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
because we have values and we have our own judgments and can't always, like, we are trained to kind of take that out of the room, but it doesn't always happen.
Right, exactly.
Ultimately.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, spirituality and religion is so personal
Yeah.
at times, and yeah, it just can get very muddied
Yeah.
very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So there is a reason, unless you identify as a Christian or faith-based specific, that your therapist more or less should try to remain neutral
Right. Yeah.
in what they share that they believe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think the other one that you brought up when we were kind of talking about this episode was a counselor, and I've heard this from clients too, as a counselor talking too much about themselves.
Yes.
Which can happen because, we don't get to talk a lot. We're like listening all day.
It's been a long day and you're your
So-
last client. No.
I need to tell you what's going on with me. No, but where I feel like this comes up is like maybe a therapist can really relate to what a client's saying and they're trying to help them through their experience. But if it doesn't have intention, what are some other factors if it doesn't have intention behind it, if it's not for a reason? Sometimes it can be unnecessary to say if it's happening all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. If your therapist is talking more about themselves than you, that's a clear sign. Right. And yeah, it does have to be very much like therapist has to be judicious and relate with the intent of feeling like helping you feel normal about whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Or taking away some of the shame. So, yeah, I mean, I realized for me that I do relate with clients more, that I found that when I start to do that more, they'll actually respond better
Yeah.
versus, how we were trained initially in grad school of like, don't say anything about yourself.
Oh gosh, they
Like,
scared us half to death.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there was this, understanding what that really is for us.
Yeah.
And so I know for me, the clients I see, that most of the time that's helpful, but I am always asking myself, is this for them?
Definitely. Yeah. And there's times where I want to just chit chat and tell you my story, but I ask myself,
Yeah.
do I really need to say this? Would it be helpful?
Right.
No.
Yeah. And most often when therapists do relate to you, it shouldn't be like a detailed account of where they're telling a really long story.
Yeah. For sure. Okay. Have you ever had any bad therapists, like personally?
Yeah.
Okay. What happened?
Yeah. Well, so this is back in my teenage years, so I may be, remembering differently about it.
Yeah.
But so there wasn't a lot of choice growing up in Wyoming about who was available to see, like my actual,
One state therapist.
right. Actually, my therapist didn't even live in Wyoming. So she would travel from just like across the border in South Dakota, and she would do home visits.
Whoa.
Right.
That's wild.
Anyways, so the terrible therapy experience that I had was at a hospital, and the therapist was just going through a series of questions and like really tough questions, just like reading them off a paper, and then I was forced to answer.
It feels
And
like
that was
very
the first-
clinical.
Yeah, and as far as and the importance of feeling safe in the room, it was the first session, and so it was just like she didn't say anything. Here she's like, "Okay, hi Julianne, here we go." Literally, that's what I
Yeah.
remember from it. I just felt so shut down, and there was no emotion.
Yeah.
There's a difference when in an intake session we're going to ask. And other therapists will ask specific questions, but there's a way of showing care, and you're reflecting, some sort of response in between.
Yeah.
And this wasn't the case. It was
Yeah.
like she was just reading it, very dry, very emotionless, and I was like, I cannot talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, okay, this might be biased, so tell me if it is. But I would say for the most part, it's probably you and not your therapist. Could we agree on that? Or would you disagree?
I would disagree with that one.
Okay. I'm going to say that I'm going to say that it's probably you and not your therapist. Why do you
Well, I mean, the
just
way,
like trust yourself, trust your gut?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try. I mean, I understand there was a way that she needed to ask the questions, but I very much.
Well, no, I'm not talking
Oh.
about your situation. Sorry, I was moving on to like general.
Oh,
Yeah, that does not sound like a good therapist. And I think that
I thought you were
happens.
discounting my experience.
No, I'm validating you, Julian.
Thank you.
But yeah, for sure. That sounds like rigid, clinical, like not, yeah. But I think overall, whenever a client comes in and they say, like, I didn't like my last therapist, I'm just kind of curious of, like, what were they not taking responsibility of?
Okay.
But yeah, there's definitely, like, not great therapists out there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and one more thing.
Okay.
Which is important because, unfortunately, like in every field, there are people that don't adhere to like ethical and legal guidelines. And so it should be very clear, by the way, that if you are in therapy, your therapist is not, there's no contact outside of the room,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah,
And-
there's like, we have pretty like rigid boundaries, like
Yeah.
what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Yeah,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be friends. Like, we can't have dual relationships with our clients. And
Yeah. So your therapist and you should not be going out to coffee, or seeing each other outside
and I think
of
most
that.
people would think that's weird anyway.
Right. But I mean, there are some people that are more vulnerable and like
Yeah.
they don't really know what are healthy boundaries.
Right.
And so, if your therapist ever like tries to initiate seeing you outside therapy,
let
that's
them
a red
touch
flag.
you.
And don't let them touch you. I know, I was afraid to say it. Don't sleep with your therapist, all right,
Yeah,
people?
that's a big no-no.
No. Well,
Yeah,
and that's
in our field.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
which
so you
I'm
cannot date
sure
your
you
therapist.
probably know that.
Yeah.
Unless you watched You.
What?
You, the TV show.
Oh,
it was
that
like
was
a
so
Lifetime.
bad.
It was on Netflix also.
Yeah.
But yeah, the therapist sleeps with their client. It's
Yeah.
Penn Badgley, I think is his name.
Oh,
Which, I mean,
scandalous.
I know. Super
Right.
scandalous.
So, just FYI, people, if you terminate therapy, you can reach out to your therapist if you wanted to be a friend 2 years after.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
and
don't
that
know, I
changes every year. It's like 2 years, and then I think last year it was 5 years,
Oh,
and
was
then
it?
before that was 2 years. So, I mean, you
Okay,
have to
I need to
look
double
into
check
it.
on
Yeah.
that. But I just think that I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah.
Like-
yeah, there's like a professional dynamic there. And
Yeah, I
there's
just
a
think it's weird
reason
to go
that
back.
we don't have a dual relationship with you is so we can be unbiased about your situation. Because, like, we couldn't have a therapeutic relationship with you if we were your friend or your sister. Like, we wouldn't be invested in you in a different way.
Yeah, and I just think how, therapy requires so much vulnerability, and you don't know, or you shouldn't know, like details of your therapist's life.
Yeah.
Right. So that just to transition into a friendship seems odd.
Yeah, and I do have clients who I haven't seen in long periods of time, and they'll send me, wedding announcements
Yeah.
or graduation announcements, or just an email with like, "Hey, this is what's going on with me."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's totally fine. I love to share with clients that are, on their way of like, yeah, feel free, to share updates like when they're, big life sort of events because
Somebody having a baby, or
yeah. Because there is something special to therapy where you do, like we do care about you.
Oh yeah,
Right. But we just don't want to be your friend.
yeah, and you don't want us to be your friend,
Yeah.
but sometimes I do want to be friends with my clients, but. Yeah, it's different. We just won't be.
we just can't. Let's just let you. Yeah. No, sometimes I want to be friends with my, clients
Yeah.
too, but I know it's not healthy.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. We talked a lot about that.
yeah. Well, no, it is so important though. I think 'cause
Yeah.
therapy is this, the relationship is so important, but healthy boundaries are what's needed.
It's such a unique relationship in that it is professional, but it's so personal.
Yes.
Like, it's probably one of the strangest, most bizarre professions
Yeah.
in that dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, it's super interesting. But okay, so going back to this question of would you say more often than not, it's the client needs to take more responsibility and maybe it's on them more than the therapist?
Oh, you're going to make me answer this?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Once again, not all therapists are perfect. No, actually, no therapist is perfect.
Yeah, no.
I would say, though, more often than not, if therapy isn't working, there's likely something going on with you.
You say that so diplomatically. It's your fault.
No, like, you're going to make me sound like a bad therapist.
No, I've already said it. I've already acknowledged it. But yeah, trust your gut. You know, if the relationship's not good, move on to another therapist or talk about it with them and then move on to another therapist. But let's talk about some of the factors that maybe you can take responsibility of or you can troubleshoot in therapy. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I think sometimes clients, like even my clients who I have a great relationship with, will withhold information for like long periods of time. Mm-hmm. One of them being like, maybe they don't want to sleep with their ex-boyfriend and they just randomly do or whatever. And they'll go months with seeing their ex-boyfriend and not tell me about it. I'm like, that is very important to talk about in therapy. And there really isn't any judgment.
Right. But it's just
our end.
Right. The clients knowing that maybe it's not the best for them and not wanting, and like the shame.
Right. Yeah. Right. The shame. But yeah, I think it is like more important to like address it and like talk about that piece of it than to withhold it. Like that's something that you can take control of. Yeah. Do you see that a lot with some of your clients?
Yeah. Oftentimes I think it's because they themselves know it's not something they want to be doing and it's a shame. So yeah, interesting. In one of my own personal therapy sessions lately, I started off and I was like, so I have a confession. And I shared something that I didn't want to be doing that I was. But my therapist so eloquently said back, like, when you say that, you have to confess something, I mean, I don't really know if therapy is about that. Like, let's look at kind of your judgment about what's going on.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
You have a good therapist.
I do. Yes. Shout out. So, and I've noticed that with some of my clients too, where they will reveal something and I'm like, okay, like in the process of therapy, you're going to do stuff that's familiar.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe go back to familiar people that aren't the best for you or have familiar thought patterns that aren't as helpful.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is. Mm-hmm. And so to work through any shame, like I start off with like, oh, this is going to be hard for me to say. And then let the therapist like be compassionate and help you guide you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've had clients who have like cancel. I notice if somebody I've seen like pretty regularly and they start canceling appointments and it's like they're avoiding me a little bit and then they come back in and they're like, oh, I have this thing. And I don't even think that they're necessarily aware that they were kind of avoiding, kind of feeling like they had a confession to make or being held accountable in a way.
Yeah. I see a lot of this in when clients are in very unhealthy relationships that they will withhold information.
Yeah. And they may set some goals around or like in their head of like have awareness of maybe not seeing them anymore, making certain changes or holding somebody accountable for something. And if they don't do that, it's hard.
Yeah. And then with eating disorders too, sometimes there can be lying and manipulation, but that's kind of a different sort of reason.
Yeah.
But ultimately you and I and other therapists, we don't need to force you to change something that you're not ready to.
Yeah.
So as a way of navigating, like if there's something that you're too scared to share, withholding information about because you think you should not be doing it or further along, like we don't have any expectation that you have to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, like we're collaborating to set goals with you, and you're setting your own goals of like what you want to change. You get to decide what that is. We can give you feedback, like maybe this is harmful or unhealthy or whatnot.
But changing patterns, like that takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right. So coming back to something that gets in the way is if you don't have realistic expectations about your growth and how therapy should be working or isn't working, I think that's something to really look at.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, I help clients look at, if you've been struggling with an issue for years, can't expect that it's going to resolve in a couple months.
Right. Yeah. And that can be frustrating.
Yeah. And you're allowed to say that
Yeah.
and feel that, and we'll be there with you in that.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean therapy isn't working,
Right.
but it can feel like that sometimes if you're not acknowledging like the baby steps you've made, the progress that you've made, like the wins, ultimately. Because ultimately, like you're changing your brain, and that takes time.
Yeah. And it can be helpful at times, though, for your therapist and you to reevaluate your goals. So that can be a way of you feeling like you're getting more momentum or of you seeing where you're taking action outside of the therapy room, too. Like if you have like weekly homework or whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that if you're coming into therapy and you're maybe not following through with some of the things that you've talked about in session, like on a recurrent, consistent basis, you're not reflecting outside of therapy, taking action outside of therapy, that can be something that you can take responsibility of.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and you may need help with that and to like troubleshoot with the therapist of like, hey, this isn't working, I do want to change this, like why are you avoiding it, why is that so hard for you to sit with? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I don't know if you see this, a lot of my clients want to run away from their feelings outside of therapy. So like
That's everyone.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But oftentimes if like a client is saying, I don't think this is, working because they feel so intensely in the room, it's because they built up that emotion.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So learning to find ways outside of therapy to get in touch with the emotion and move through that and all of that, whether it's journaling or yoga or other mindful activities. Like you can't expect that once a week going in and looking and feeling those feelings on that intense of a level if you're like trying to numb out or avoid. That's just not fair.
Yeah, it reminds me of like a pressure cooker a little bit, like letting some of the pressure out like a little bit at a time, throughout, like outside of therapy.
Yeah, we get absolutely that, feelings can be so overwhelming and feel big and uncontrollable. And that's where like talk with your therapist about what, like you said, what are the small steps that you can take to get in touch? It's like a minute of, pausing and like naming what you're feeling. That's something I do with clients.
Yeah, it's like, doesn't sound like a lot,
But
and like there's some science behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, like we understand patterns and like the fear in doing things different. And you've got to let us help you with the baby steps.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Yeah.
Asking for what you need. Talk about like how you see that like with clients impacting their therapy experience.
Yeah, I think that, and I share this with my clients of like, tell from the get-go, I'm like, tell me what you're needing, what you're wanting in therapy. And I said this earlier, but yeah, are you the type of person that like wants concrete things, like wants homework assignments, wants tangible things to do outside of therapy? Are you just kind of needing space to just process through things in therapy? Is it a little bit of both? Will that evolve and change? So let's collaborate. And I'm going to tell you what I think. In our last episode, we were talking about sometimes people need to sit with their emotion and versus like doing something about it. And I want to make this like a good experience for you too. So yeah, it's important to like share, or, some clients will say like, hey, I want you to be real honest with me.
Yes.
Like just shoot straight with me.
Yeah. Don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
Which I actually had a client discontinue with me because they thought I was too nice.
Okay.
And sugarcoating. And I was like, well, I mean, could it be a little bit about me, but also about their process in therapy, and maybe they actually needed to receive that compassion. Like that person also had a really loud inner critic.
Yeah.
And though that's different than if you really do need your therapist to just be direct.
Yeah. Absolutely. Or it could be, I'm really sensitive. I need, gentle feedback from you. Whatever that is. Yeah, I think it's important to like share what you need, like when that comes up for you.
Yeah. I had somebody tell me too that I get it. Like sometimes there's a lot of anxiety going into therapy. Right. And I think it was kind of looking at expectations for what it needed to be. But I was very like proud of my client that was saying like, yeah, it's sometimes, I have to work myself up to come. And I was like, thank you so much for sharing. And so, we're just going to structure this session differently. So we're going to do some breathing and settle into it. So you don't feel like you have to go like, 100 miles per hour right into everything that is, like causing issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that is so important to like share if you're anxious about coming into session. And I had one client, we would talk about that every time she came in, like what's her anxiety level about being in therapy today? Because there was a little bit of social anxiety too. And so it was like helpful in a lot of like our small micro relationship, but influences all her other relationships and how she interacts with them. So yeah, kind of being vulnerable. Like that's really immediate. Like, hey, I'm nervous right now. It's not that thing that I did last week or that's coming up in a week, because there's some distance from that.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's just really vulnerable to share like how you feel about your therapist, like in the room. Right. But sometimes that can be really helpful.
Yeah. So if there's anything that we could say, talk it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like about whatever your experience is.
Yeah. Just sit and going back to that, like kind of narration of just like, say what is on your mind.
Yeah. And start with, this is, when it's hard to really address what it is, I always default to, okay, start with the smallest, easiest thing you can talk about. And so oftentimes it's being immediate narrating of, well, I'm not sure what to expect and I'm nervous.
Yeah, definitely.
And then go from there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times like clients come in and there's like something wrong and they know they want an overall change, but maybe like thinking about your motivation for change like on a spectrum, like where are you actually at on that motivation for change? Like are you like very close to like not changing at all, or are you on the other end of like, okay, I'm ready to do some hard work, and not that you need to change that, but maybe accept and acknowledge where you are at.
Yeah, so you really have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah, there can be some denial.
Yes.
That happens.
Yes. So if you're thinking therapy isn't working because you haven't changed careers and that's what you wanted to, and you're not doing anything in between sessions, such as looking at new jobs or practicing interview skills, affirming yourself, enhancing your strengths, working on your anxiety, and you're saying, well, therapy isn't working.
Yeah, that's something to kind of look at.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
What else do we have? Oh, yeah. Let's talk about medication.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
So sometimes, and this is the way that I phrase it to my clients right up front. I'm saying, we're going to do everything that we can. I'm going to help you, give you lots of tools, and, we're going to set appropriate expectations for when there should be some relief. Okay. But sometimes when you're working as hard as you can, but there is a diagnosis of anxiety or depression, OCD, and there is a biological component that therapy and all the tools that you're doing can't really address, medication may be needed.
Yes.
And I know people are so resistant to this
And
because
it's
they
so
feel like
funny.
they're failing.
Well, it's interesting too, because I feel like that clients come in and they think that they're the only one who doesn't want medication, but literally nobody wants to have to rely. They don't desire to rely on medication or to have to use that as an additional support. So
Yeah.
you're not alone in that.
You're not alone in it. And though it really just is the smart move when thinking about what's in your control and what's out of your control. Yes, yoga, meditation, some sort of movement can help rewiring and boosting, serotonin and dopamine, but not to the extent that sometimes is needed.
Right.
Depending on your severity of anxiety and depression.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for my clients, what I see is sometimes, so not everybody's on medication, but the clients who do need medication, like they start to feel normal again, and they can actually use some of the coping skills that we've talked about. But like before that, they were having such intense anxiety that they couldn't follow through with it. So once they feel normal for a while, and then eventually they can get off the medication.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
But they know what normal feels like, so they can tap back into that.
Yeah. And I find too, when my clients get on medication, like oftentimes the thoughts aren't so overwhelming, and there's space for them to not be so reactive. And that's what's helpful, because they have time to think about, okay, well, do I really need to be as anxious about this versus like without without medication, and they're just constantly thought after thought after thought that evokes those like intense feelings.
Gosh, that just sounds awful.
Yeah.
Even just saying that.
Yeah. So
That
if
feeling.
if therapy isn't working, maybe come back to this idea, just like physical health requires medication at times, so does mental health.
Yeah.
And
And you can talk to your therapist about that. I mean, not that we prescribe medication, but it's something that we can refer you to someone or give you our feedback on that as well.
Yeah. Medication plus therapy, medication isn't going to solve everything.
Yeah.
But it's just can be a booster.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think with therapy, like for the clients or people who are like, well, I don't need somebody to tell me what to do or what's wrong with me or give me advice or whatever. What I say a lot to those people are we have blind spots. And so you have this unbiased person who's maybe able to help you build awareness of those blind spots. Like you're not unique in that you don't have blind spots.
We all do.
Yeah.
Even ourselves as therapists.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
That's why we have to
we
see
may
other
have the
therapists.
biggest blind. No.
Yeah. Like, call me out of my shit.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a big one too, of like just being able to see the therapy session, the therapist as actually helpful. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you can think of?
Yeah. Something that like this idea that therapy isn't working. I can just talk to my friends.
Oh yeah. I feel like I do that a lot.
And maybe you can absolutely get some
that's
support.
a great coping skill.
Yeah,
It's
we do
great.
encourage
do that.
clients to talk to others.
Yeah.
And know that therapy is different because there's going to be some sort of investment on the friend or the family member that they're not going to remain unbiased.
Right.
Or they can for a little bit at a time, but not ultimately.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
that's why
There's only like so
yeah.
much. Yeah. Yeah, I love this little it's like what good therapy is, and This idea that it's insight and self-awareness. It's a sense of unburdening, like you're able to just kind of,
Release.
yeah, get it off your chest. A sense of developing forgiveness for yourself, for others. There is this space of like kind of unconditional acceptance in the therapy room that a therapist should bring in of like, hey, we can talk about everything. It's connection to another. And, in hopes of that you do have like increased satisfaction, self-compassion, and some of the things you want to change are changed. You overall feel better. So I don't know, anything else you want to add to troubleshooting therapy?
How to know when you need to, it's okay for you to switch therapists, and that like that you can anticipate that will be a hard conversation, but your therapist
It's
is
happened
receptive.
before.
Yeah.
You're not the first one to fire us or
Yeah.
to like want to change.
Yeah, we're here for you.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in terms of wanting you to get what you need. And so just
Absolutely.
that reminder of, if you realize that it really is more about the therapist and less about you and what you're doing in therapy, like just talk about it.
Yeah,
Give yourself permission to do something for yourself.
for sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and I think that that's a good one to remember.
So, shall we call that a wrap?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts and feedback on iTunes. If you've ever had a therapist that wasn't a good fit for you or noticed something in yourself that you needed to change ultimately. So, yeah, we'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everyday Therapy Podcast. Don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes and share with your friends. It really helps us reach more people.
We might only record once a week, but we're with you every day.